Hello. Well, Father John Francis is doing some interviews with Christian leaders around the country about the crisis and how they see things going. And for better or for worse, he's asked me to answer the same questions that he's asking those other folks. So thank you for the opportunity, Father John Francis. And I will give you my answers now. Your first question was, how do you see the church being the church during this pandemic? I would say that this has been actually, despite what you would expect and imagine, a really extraordinary time for the church to excel in the sorts of things that the church does. The church does essentially three things, I think. It worships, it gives pastoral care to people, and it works for social outreach, helping people meet their basic human needs. And in all three of those areas, I think the crisis has brought the church generally, not thinking just of our parish here, but generally, the church, I think, has responded really well in each of those ways. In worship, everybody is now streaming worship services, Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, liberal, mainstream, everything is kind of, we're putting our stuff out there and it's being watched. In St. Paul's, over the 8 weeks that we've been streaming our stuff on YouTube, we have had 4,500 views. In the United Kingdom, church attendance is now at 25%. That's the number of people who have watched a worship service of some kind online since the start of their lockdown. So worship continues, and actually more of it is being done than usual. Possibly on Easter Day, there were more people attending an act of worship, usually online, but also in person, than on any other day in human history. In terms of pastoral care, I see, that's been slightly more difficult because we've had to be creative. We at St. Paul's, we've had a phone tree where we've identified particular folks who are elderly or have other vulnerabilities for whom this period of self-isolation may be really quite difficult. And so we've been phoning folks like that. And I'm thankful to the vestry for how they have taken the lead in that act of care and love. So that's something that we've been really trying to do, and I think that generally churches have done well in this capacity. As I speak to my colleagues in other parishes, many of them actually working harder now than they did before the crisis. And for them, that the reason that they're working so hard is they're doing a really amazing job in this pastoral care aspect of ministry. And then there's social outreach. And again, I see churches really stepping up to the plate in providing opportunities for people to receive food who are lacking a good meal. Lots of money being given by church members around the country to outreach programs, and including here at St. Paul's, we had an extraordinary number of people giving in the last few weeks to projects to feed hungry people, and thank you so much for that. So I see the church being the church in all the ways it's supposed to be, which is really exciting. Now, what do I see on the horizon? Well, perhaps slightly less rosy in my personal perspective. Let me explain that. There are increased opportunities for the church as we move forward. And all we have to do is what we've always done. What we've always done as the Christian church is to adapt to whatever cultural circumstances we now find ourselves in. The church has been uniquely gifted and successful in doing this. You think about what we were. the church was a very small number of people, all of whom were Jewish, in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. Now, clearly, the church went through massive, staggering transformations culturally as it moved out to other parts of the world, so that on every continent, with almost every civilization that we have, the people in the West have come into contact with, a Christian church has started using indigenous languages, indigenous cultural forms, translating the Bible into ways, using metaphors that are appropriate to indigenous peoples, so that we in North America, we consider Christianity to be a North American religion, which it isn't. Numerically, the African church is bigger than the North American church, and historically, clearly, it's not an American religion. And yet that is how good the Christian church is at adapting to culture. So that's all we have to do the thing that's in our DNA to adapt to what's going to be a frightening and unknown future. What will our culture look like when we start to reopen? Will we just kind of like go back to normal, and society go back to the same problems that we had, or will we see this as an opportunity to do some transformation of our society? Whatever it is, the church needs to be involved fully in that discussion. So this crisis has revealed things about our society. It's revealed how unequal we are in our access to essential goods and services like quality education, quality healthcare. It's revealed inequality in terms of who has suffered the most from COVID-19. I saw a statistic yesterday. It didn't quote the authority, so I can't say that this is the truth, but I'll just tell you what it said, and you can research it yourself maybe, that of those who have died in the United States from COVID-19, 60% are from minority communities. 60%. And yet minority communities are a small proportion of the total population. So that's a troubling fact, if indeed that is a fact. It's troubling that those in low-paid jobs are those we are expecting to go to work now. Those of us in well-paid jobs have a greater freedom to work from home. So what I think this crisis has done is reveal some structural problems in our economy and our society. And it's an invitation to address those rather than just go back to normal when everything's okay. Some of our lives were unsustainable before the crisis. Some of us, I think, were running on empty. Some of us were about to snap from the stress and strain of all the different demands on our lives. Pausing, as we've been able to do for a few weeks, I think can, if we want it to be a resource for us to just imagine how we want to live our lives when we're back to normal. And don't make it normal, make it exceptional. So if we were living lives that were essentially unsustainable before the crisis, let's not return to those unsustainable lives. Let's learn how we are going to recreate ourselves, our work patterns, our living patterns, the way we use our money, the way we use our time and our other resources. Think about how we can recreate that in a way which is sustainable, where we're not going to crash and burn psychologically or physically. And our tribalism is another thing which the crisis, initially the crisis put our tribalism beneath the surface, I think. We all sort of came together and we passed some acts of Congress, which the president signed off on, and there was a feel that we were all in this together, I think. Philosophically now, after getting on for 2 months, I think that's fracturing. And I think one of the things that we are discovering, which we perhaps forgot, is that the centre can no longer hold in American politics and philosophical life. And what happens now, there are actually some fairly scary options that I think we as a people could take. But there are some sound options as well. So I'm hopeful. Well, I'm not actually hopeful, but I wish, I pray that the crisis, now that it's revealed again how deep our tribalism is, might actually be the impetus to doing something about that. And John Francis' final question is a Bob Dylan song. What would be a Bob Dylan song for me, which I think is applicable right now? And for me, it would be the song "It's All Over Now, Baby Blue." Not in an apocalyptic sense, although it might indeed be all over now, baby blue, in an apocalyptic sense, but in as much as any kind of delusions that we had got life nailed, that we had got everything sorted and understood and in order and under control, any of those delusions are now over. It's all over now, baby blue. We can't go back to the way things were before, thinking that life was sustainable. We can't go back to thinking that human beings are in control of their own destiny. It was all so fragile. Human control is also temporary and fake, because we just don't have that control, essentially. So let's not go back to living that way. Let's realize that it's God's earth, we are God's people, and look to him for the control that we have tried to exert for ourselves. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Father John Francis. I hope that's been useful in stirring some thoughts for you. Thank you.